Welcome to the fantastic world of Hanna-Barbera, a celebration of Bill Hanna, Joe Barbera, and the thousands of people past and present who have shared in their entertainment tradition. Here we go! And now your host, Greg Ehrbar.
Thank you, Chris Anthony. Welcome to our fantastic world. We have a very fun as well as tastic show today. That's because we have a guest who, if you know Hanna-Barbera, she used to say things like this.
Hello, hello, police headquarters. Rosemary, your friendly female fuzz speaking. What's that? Someone just stole a warehouse full of bubble gum? I find that awfully hard to swallow.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is KATHY GORI. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
I would love to know more about the wonderful story of KATHY GORI, your life and career. I'm pretty sure that you are Italian because you baked cookies and brought them to the recording sessions.
I used to bring cookies. I'm Italian, and then what happened was a few years ago, my mother never talked about her family. I'm 5 generations San Franciscan. My family came to California for the gold rush in the 1840s. And we came from Louisiana. The thing that I didn't know after I did a DNA test is my mother, part of her ancestry, my father's like right off, they're right off the boat from northern Italy. My mom's family actually has been in the United States for before it was the United States. Her family are French Creoles from New Orleans that came down from Canada. And then they hooked up with some Italians who happened to be living in Kentucky who went west after the Civil War. So the Louisianans came for the gold rush and mixed it up with some other people they met out. I mean, I got family all over the United States, including indigenous cousins who live on a reservation up in Alaska. So, yeah, I mean, I'm Italian and about a half a dozen other things.
Not only that, but between New Orleans Creole and Italian, the food must be great.
I do my best. I have a Substack. I had a website for years, and then I moved to a Substack called The Colors of Indian Cooking, which is the same name as my old thing, because it's my hobby, is cooking. So I write about recipes, and every week there's a new recipe, and you can subscribe for free, or you can, make me a token subscription offering of money. But either way, the recipes keep coming because I cook every damn day. It's on Substack. It's called The Colors of Indian Cooking, or you can just go KATHY GORI. I am there. So you will be able to see all the recipes, and you can cook some of this food. I got shrimp and grits up there. I got a lot of Indian recipes. I got a lot of Italian recipes. It's the whole thing, just because I cook.
So you grew up in this interesting family. And
yeah.
When did you decide that you got the writing or the acting bug?
It was the acting bug at first, and I used to do voices as a kid and everything. And when I was a teenager, everybody got chicken pox. And I got chicken pox, but it went into shingles in my left eye. And my parents had to rush me to the ER. In a kid, that's serious. And they were afraid I would lose the sight in my left eye. And what happened was I was given medication, a new type of medication. And then what they did was they had me in a dark room for about 3 months, I guess. And all I could do was listen to the radio. I couldn't read. I couldn't watch TV. So I listened to the radio, and I got into listening to a lot of stuff. And I started doing more voices. And then I started calling the radio station. And the radio station at one point said, why don't you come down here and do that stuff? I mean, I was a kid. So I went down to the radio station, and they were absolutely shocked. Here was this kid who had just had like chicken pox and everything else. And I looked really weird. But they put me on the air, and I wound up doing voices. I was still in high school, and they would call my mom when I'd be getting ready for school in the morning. They'd say, the Queen's in town. Have Kathy do Queen Elizabeth. Could you do Queen Elizabeth? I'm like, hey, can you do Queen Elizabeth? Oh, yes, very well. I would be happy to, so I would do Queen Elizabeth. And after I graduated, I started college, and they offered me a job, and I was on the air every morning with Terry McGovern, who was the morning drive guy. And we had our show, and I would write sketches for the show, and I would do characters for the show, and a lot of the voices that I did on that show I wound up doing later at Hanna-Barbera. What happened was I went down to Los Angeles when I was about 18, 19. I was out of high school, so I was about 19 years old. My mom and dad took me to the airport. I had written letters to try to get in and talk to people. I never wrote a letter to Hanna-Barbera. I wound up out on the traffic island right in front of the Hanna-Barbera studios. I called and I said, I'm here, right? And it's like, well, who are you? And I said, well, I've got an appointment. I'm KATHY GORI and I have an appointment. They said, oh, and they couldn't find the appointment, but they said, well, how far away are you? Can you get here? And I said, Yeah, I think I can get here. I was on a traffic island in the intersection. I had just made a payphone call. They said, well, get over here as soon as you can and, we'll squeeze you in. So I ran across the street. I said, I'm here. And they invited me in and they tested me for Gidget Makes the Wrong Connection, which was some Saturday morning movie they were doing.
ABC Saturday Superstar movie.
Right. And I wound up getting cast as Gidget. Out of the blue. I had never done anything before. Alex Lilly, they hired me. And I went back to San Francisco that afternoon and then started coming back down to L.A. to do Gidget.
Anybody at all. We need help and need it fast. And we don't even care what kind of help it is. Call the police. Call the Coast Guard. Call the Marines. The FBI, IRS, the CRA, COR, CRO.
CIA.
Just send the whole alphabet.
After that, I wound up getting cast in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, the musical, in the San Francisco company of the musical. I played Peppermint Patty, and that kind of enabled me to do more voice stuff. And then there was a baseball strike in Los Angeles. KMPC was looking for a new all-night host. They were scouting all over the country. We were in San Francisco. They heard me on the radio. So I wound up on the radio. They sent me down to Los Angeles. My career down there was launched. And the next thing I knew, I was spending a lot of time at Hanna-Barbera doing all kinds of stuff. Hong Kong Phooey, doing Inch High Private Eye, the new Tom and Jerry. The one thing is, I wish I had gotten on the Smurfs, and I wish I had gotten Scooby-Doo. Velma. I read for Velma. It got down to between me and whoever wound up doing Velma. I didn't get Velma. Damn, that's the one I wish I had.
Well, but Rosemary is yours.
Oh, she is mine. Yeah.
I have a few questions about your wonderful life that you were talking about. First of all, Terry McGovern was not only a major radio personality, but he's a great voice actor.
Yeah, I talked to Terry. In fact, Terry lives up here. We have a house in Sonoma, which is where I am right now. He lives in Marin County. For a while, he lived in Los Angeles, and we used to hang out. He and his wife, moved down there for a bit because he was doing more, voice stuff. Now he does a lot of, I think, games and things like that. He's a real king of the voice stuff there with the gaming.
He was the original Launchpad McQuack on DuckTales.
Yeah, I remember Terry and I, at the time we didn't know Paul Frees, but Paul Frees, who was like the big voice king, he lived in Sausalito at the time. And I think the rumor was he lived on a boat. And this is the stories we heard. When he had to do voice stuff, he would just kind of wake up, turn on the recording machine, and he would do his characters and then be right back on his boat. He didn't even have to get off the boat. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know supposedly he had a recording studio in his house.
Before people had the computers and the things that allowed, which means that was something. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I mean, I literally had to get on a plane and go down to Hanna-Barbera, whereas I've done stuff for the BBC, various, and I don't even have to leave my house. I've done stuff from home. It's not a problem. Here I am.
Yeah, that's another thing you bring up. The BBC radio drama and comedy didn't totally die in England. It's still there.
Oh, no. Oh, yes. Yeah, I've done a bunch of stuff there. I did some stuff for their 9/11 memorial. They did some of the play the guys about the fireman 9/11. So they asked me if I would play the lead role in that, the segment that they did. So I recorded that. A recording studio up here, which does a lot of stuff. Anything I've done for the BBC, I've done from a studio up here, though a couple of things I've done from my own house. I mean, I have a mic, I have the whole setup, so I could do it as long as the dog stays out of the room.
That may play again, too, because BBC Radio 4 Extra reruns a lot of the dramas, and they're all accessible for limited times.
Yeah, my best friend from high school lives over there. She married a British guy and has been over there for years. And she heard me. She said, it was really weird to hear my friend from school, they're coming out of the radio in England. So they're,
Now, you also mentioned being in the play.
Yeah. I was in the original musical, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. They were in New York when I was still in high school. And then there was a San Francisco company. There was a company in major cities and then around the world. I think they were in London.
Yeah.
Broadway shows will have companies in other cities and in other countries. And so I was in the San Francisco company because the girl who had been playing Peppermint Patty, she had been cast in a TV series in Los Angeles, and she was going down to do this show with Tim Conway. What happened was my boyfriend at the time, because I was 19, I was in college, and we were up at the Russian River hanging out on the beach, and he said, I'm going to go. He was also an actor. We were struggling actors in college. And he said, I'm going to go and audition for this You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown thing this next week. Because of the union rules, Actors Equity, they have one day where non-Actor Equity members can come in and audition, and hopefully then you get a job and you can get in the union. So I said, oh, okay, well, let's go. I'll go with you. I wasn't planning on auditioning. So we get down there, and of course, anytime there's a thing where you don't have to be in the union, but you can get into the union, if we give you a job, everybody's there. It's a packed house, all these young kids wanting to be in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And so my boyfriend has his audition, and this guy goes, are you auditioning? And he says, what's your name? And I told him my name, and he says, you're auditioning. And I figured, okay, what the hell? I'm here, so sure. I said, yeah, I'm auditioning. I said, can the guys just play anything? He said, oh, they know everything. So whatever you want to sing, you don't have to even have the music. We'll know it. They call me. I get up and I sing I'm the Greatest Star from Funny Girl, Barbra Streisand song. And what happened was I got cast in the show. Lucy was also leaving. She was going to do a movie, and the girl had been playing Lucy. So it was between me and this other girl, the two of us, and she got part of Lucy. She was actually in Actors Equity. She'd done shows before. And I got cast as Peppermint Patty. And my boyfriend, that was the last I saw him. I don't think I ever talked to him after that. He didn't get cast as anything. That was it. I'm sure he was sorry he brought me to the audition, but that's what happened. And so I was in that show for quite a while. We toured to Los Angeles, and we toured to Arizona, and Charles Schulz traveled with us occasionally and would come down. And so he was a really sweet guy. I really, really liked Mr. Schulz. He created all of us characters, and he was just a terrific guy. The same thing was true with Joe Barbera. When I got hired at Hanna-Barbera, maybe because I had an Italian last name, but people had said, he took me around and introduced me to everybody. He took me through the thing where all the animators were working, where all the cell guys. I mean, it was amazing. Yeah, I didn't expect to get that kind of a welcome there, but I did. It really was cool to be a kid down there and be treated like that. It was very nice.
There was something special about some of those individuals who had built something or created something. It was such a part of them that they loved to share it with people. Yeah, definitely. I mean, both Schulz, working with you on Your Good Man, Charlie Brown, would tell me stories about, his childhood and creating Peanuts and what that was like, how it became this phenomenon. And then Joe Barbera was kind of like, everybody knew him and he was friendly, and I would make Italian cookies, and it was great. It was just great. Like, I understood guys like that. Yeah, and they were very hands-on with what they did because it had been theirs, and Charles Schulz drew that comic strip himself till the day he left us. I mean, he drew enough to finish out the century. And Joe Barbera, even though the company was bought out and became bigger and bigger, and the nature of their jobs, the workload changed, he always had a hand in everything they did. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I have little pictures that Charles Schulz drew for me. He drew me a Woodstock on an air sick bag one time when we flew from, we were doing the show in Los Angeles. We had to fly. Actually, we were in Arizona. When he got me a little tiny turquoise ring for my little finger. He was afraid of planes, and so was I. It's my first time on a plane flying for You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And so what he did was, we held hands when the plane took off because we were both terrified. And when it landed in Los Angeles, we had a 20-minute or half-hour layover before we went on to San Francisco. Oh, he bought me a pilot's hat, too. The kind of thing they give to 5-year-olds, and the wings. Mm-hmm. And the pilots knew Charles Schulz was on the plane. So they asked us, do you guys want to come and see the cockpit? And we both went, no, we don't want to see any part of this. We don't want to know how the thing works. We just want to get on to land. And we got off the plane. He would not go into the cockpit, nor would I. I did not want to see all the dial. I didn't want to see how the thing worked because we had to get back on again and fly. Maybe if we were for good on the land, we would have, but we didn't. He was fun. He was a lot of fun. And he humored me because I was like the age of some of his kids. I started working before I was really even an adult. My parents would sign things for me, So when you started with the Gidget, was Bailey's Comets in there someplace too? Because that was DePatie Freeling. I did 2 shows for DePatie Freeling. One was Bailey's Comets, where I played, I think, Sarge. She had a very deep voice.
I get it. We'll make her so good looking, she'll go looking for another boyfriend. First step, hairdo. Hut, 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 hut. Next step, makeup.
On the double, buddy. Hut, hut, hut. Last stop, mirror. Yay!
There was another show I did at the Patty Freeling. It might have been the Barclays. It's vague because the one I really remember is Sarge. And it felt weird because everything I had done prior to that had been at Hanna-Barbera. And all of a sudden I was in strange territory with the Patty Freeling. I remember I had to use a Thomas Brothers map to get to the Patty Freeling Studios because I had just learned to drive down in Los Angeles and I didn't know where I was half the time. I had a different exit off the freeway to get to DePatty Freeling, and I was very worried about getting there.
I read that the parking lot became a tennis court for DePatty, so the entire staff pretty much had to go out and put money in their meters every few hours.
Yeah, I mean, it was not, let's put it this way, it was not Hanna-Barbera at all. And the guys that I wish I had worked for, and I never had worked for them, was the people that did Bullwinkle and Rocky. I watched that as a kid. I also watched Yogi Bear as a kid and all that stuff. I loved those shows. And I didn't get to do anything for the Rocky and Bullwinkle guys. And I wound up at Disney writing. I was a screenwriter later, but never did a cartoon for Disney. And that was another thing a childhood goal, you know. Oh, I want to be where Mickey Mouse is. I want to go and do voices over there. But I never wound up doing anything at Disney with my voice.
You've come such a long way from such a young age. Let's talk Hong Kong Phooey, because that is sort of the crown jewel.
Oh, yeah.
A wild premise was something that, Barbera was notorious in a nice way, going into a pitch meeting with so many boards, and then the execs and the sponsors might say, well, we like bits and pieces of this and this and this. And so he'd say, oh, sure. And he'd come back to Hannah with a convoluted, unbelievable, what were they thinking kind of premise. And it worked, and it was so fun, and people remember it decades later. Hong Kong Phooey was like that.
I've always wondered, I mean, even doing it, I thought, where did this come from? I wound up doing a commercial about a year or so, I guess, after Hong Kong Phooey with the guy that was, hey, Grasshopper, that guy from the, Carradine.
David Carradine, yeah.
That used to do the Hong Kong, the kind of the Kung Fu show.
Kung Fu, yeah.
Yeah, it was Kung Fu, okay. And it was strange because here I was doing this stuff at Hanna-Barbera, and then there was another TV show with Kung Fu. Then I was on the radio and I was playing Kung Fu fighting. So I was living in a Kung Fu world.
And on Hong Kong Phooey, of course, you worked with the wonderful, legendary Scatman Crothers.
Oh, God, he was great. He was fabulous. He used to bring his ukulele in to recording sessions. We would have breaks. He'd sit around, he'd play the uke. He would tell stories about his days, early days, I guess he was in vaudeville and all this other stuff he did. He knew, I guess he and Joey Ross went back because the two of them had a zillion stories. The only difference was Scatman knew he was talking to a kid, and yeah. Joey would just tell me everything. Wait, what were you doing? And who are you married to? And it was like, I'd hear these stories and, Scatman would kind of give him like a, hey, she's like 19, you better not let's not do this. And Joey was just, he was a real character too. But Scatman was incredibly sweet, amazingly talented. And I remember seeing him in The Shining later on. And he was just great. What a really, really wonderful man. And was the heart and soul of that show, really.
Oh, yeah, he was. And he had started actually on a record filling in for Sammy Davis Jr. on the Alice in Wonderland record they did in '66, and it really impressed them then. And then he got cast as Meadowlark for the Harlem Globetrotters in '71. But this was the first lead he got, and it's really the first male African-American lead voice in a cartoon, really.
Right,
so
right.
It's very, very much and all I knew as a kid is I love this man's voice. I love seeing him appear on TV. He was on Chico and the Man. It's like, oh, yeah. So to hear him in that cartoon, even when he wasn't singing, he was singing when he was speaking.
Yeah, he was really, really great. And he was in Cocoon, The Shining, and then he left way too soon. He died, to me, everybody seemed old when I was like 19 years old, but it seemed like he did not live as long as he should have. To give us much more entertainment. You have a lot of factors involved in that, but...
There's a biography that he started and his wife finished with another writer, It's a very worthwhile book because this is someone who lived through all of that.
Yeah.
Rags to riches, touring in little towns with his band and things when he was living history.
Right.
One of the things that I thought was just so cool is the author said, I'll take you to lunch anywhere. And he said, I want to go to McDonald's because there's a lot of kids there. And he loved it when kids heard his voice and knew he was Hong Kong Phooey.
Absolutely. I mean, it was so distinctive. A number of years ago, maybe 9 or 10 years ago, they were actually talking about doing a live action Hong Kong Phooey. I guess maybe a mix of live action and animation over, I think Warner's was going to do it. And they were talking to Eddie Murphy about playing Hong Kong Phooey. Out on the internet somewhere, a while back, somebody sent me a clip of test footage from that Warner Brothers thing when they were planning it, with Eddie Murphy doing the voice. And it was a combination of live action. It's sort of like, Jessica Rabbit, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. They never went beyond that. But it was like watching the cartoon with, Eddie Murphy doing Scatman.
So did people recognize you just in regular life, or would people say, are you, or would you do the voice at...
Well, if somebody asked me to, and I would get requested, do the voice, call me do the voice, that kind of thing, which I would do. But, I don't normally talk like that. So, I actually wound up on public radio for a while doing the morning show and talking to like senators and congressmen. Hello. So what's going on in Washington? Tell me the scoop. Why can't you pass it? You're shutting down the government again? You don't say. It's that kind of stuff. So no, unless I actually went out on that limb, nobody knew, I literally get mail every week about that character, and people asking for a picture or people writing me and sending me things to sign. It is really amazing, the longevity of that show.
You mean to this day you still do?
Yes, I probably, look, I'm not Taylor Swift. I don't get stacks of that kind of mail, but for me, I get about 4 or 5 letters and requests a week from people. I'm always sending stuff out to people. They remember the character. And I even have people weren't even born when the show was on originally, who saw it in reruns and saw it on, the Cartoon Network and that kind of stuff, wherever it was running. And they're now in their 30s and 40s, and they want their kids to see the show. I got a letter the other day from a guy who's a grandfather, and he remembered the show. And now that makes me feel really ancient, but he remembered the show. He wants his grandchildren to be able to enjoy it, and he's showing the show to them. My sister, this is a different Hanna-Barbera show I did. My sister-in-law called me from New York City and says, we've got this friend. He's Lenny Weinrib's nephew or cousin or something. He's a fan of Inch High Private Eye. He's coming to our house for dinner for his birthday. Could you call up and ask him for his Uncle Inch? So I said, yeah, okay. I said, just call me up. Let me know when you want me to call. So I did. And I got the guy on the phone. I did the Lori voice. And I asked him if he'd seen Uncle Inch. And the guy he did not expect it. He laughed and laughed and laughed. Frank Welker was another one I worked with. Frank was terrific.
And he's sort of become the preeminent because he can do everything.
Yeah.
And at this period, pretty much all of the Hanna-Barbera veterans were doing incidental voices, if not lead voices, in shows.
Right.
Like Janet Waldo and Don Messick and people like that were still in things that you were.
Oh, yeah. No, I worked with Don Messick in Valley of the Dinosaurs. Because Jackie Haley, Mike Rhodes, Alan Oppenheimer, Casey Kasem was on the show too, because I remember working with Casey on that show. And that was a fun show to do, Valley of the Dinosaurs.
Well, you got all the good lines because Katie was sort of the smart aleck one of the group. She brought that attitude from the present day into this.
Oh, yeah.
And if we tried to get that clamshell, we'd end up sending out an SOS ourselves.
Hey, there's another one. I've got an idea. Over here, you overgrown lizard!
That was some idea you had. 2 platyosauruses weren't enough?
What?
Say, your idea worked.
Come on, Katie.
Jackie was funny, Jackie Haley, because he had just done, I guess, the Bad News Bears. There was somebody there younger than me. He was a kid. He was a real kid.
Shannon, we've had actually on the podcast. She's a lovely person. very talented long career.
Yeah.
And Mike Road was Race Bannon, for gosh sakes.
Right.
He was also the Fireman's Fund spokesperson for a long time.
Right, right. And in those days, back then, we'd go to the upfronts for the network, and that was always fun, too.
Really?
Because, oh, yeah. We'd go to the upfronts at the Century Plaza Hotel, went to a couple of those, and everybody would be milling around because it was a Saturday morning TV show. So they would bring us all out. Like, I don't think anybody knew who the heck we were unless we went, hello, hello. And then it was like, oh, yeah, oh, you're okay. Now I know who you are. But yeah, no, we'd go to that. And that was always really a lot of fun. The weird thing is I get mail from overseas. I have had mail from Ukraine. I've had mail from Germany. I've had mail from almost every European country because it's running on wherever they're running it in the EU, it runs. Some of the first stuff I got was from the Brits. Evidently, Hong Kong Phooey was quite popular in the UK. That really hit the mark there. I always was amazed the show was one season. And it is such a cult classic that even doing the show, I don't know how the others felt, but I didn't quite even know what we were doing. This was just so bizarre. The show itself was so weird. And the idea that they didn't do another season, and yet that one season just does not die. And I don't want it to die. People love it, but it's just sort of this thing that goes on. And it's very strange.
Well, each one of the three big Hanna-Barberas that you did, they ran a season, but what they used to do is rerun them about 6 times over a 2-year period on the network, and then they would release them in any number of ways, as I mentioned. But it didn't matter. Kids weren't counting each episode. We didn't know that there were 16 or 17. It would just recycle, and we'd go, oh, I think I remember this one, or, oh, this is a good one. That was when you're a kid and you say, this is a good one.
Yeah, right.
Like, oh, this is the one where. It didn't really register how the length or how many. What was interesting about all three of these, and this is so Hanna-Barbera, is that in the opening title, you got the premise. Like Valley of the Dinosaurs was classic. They told the entire story, great theme song, and you were done, and then you just went into the story. Same thing with Hong Kong Phooey. It was a great opening, and then you got who he was, who everybody was, where they were, cool song that you could never forget, and even more so an Inch High Private Eye, because he's dialing a phone, with himself, and now that establishes he's a little tiny person. Here's all the people he works with, all in 60 seconds. And an Inch High, it was like, Hanna-Barbera would do this, and we didn't care. We loved it. Yes. They didn't tell you why he was an inch high.
Well, I don't know. He just was, and I was his niece, and I don't know how that all came about.
Yeah.
Whether my mother was inch high or my father was an inch high. I don't know whether he was an uncle on my mom's side or my dad's side. Well, when Hanna-Barbera put on like Huckleberry Hound, and those were on in the evening, I think, because I remember bugging my parents to let me watch Huckleberry Hound. And I remember, I think it was dark outside.
It may have been early evening. Because they were syndicated. It's very possible it could have been 5, 6, even 7, depending.
Yeah, I think it was like around that time. Yeah, because my mom would go, all right, sure, I'll put it on. We would bother her Saturday morning, knock at my parents' door. Would somebody please get up and turn on the TV? And they would turn on the TV so we could watch cartoons.
Yes.
They did not like to have to do that for us, but we did, yeah. But I was watching these shows, Hanna-Barbera, years after I should not have been watching them, but I was fascinated by them. And so to actually wind up there after just a few years earlier, watching this stuff on TV myself, wow, that was a big thrill. The way we all went into work, we weren't camera ready most of the time. We were just like, hey, we were in our casual clothing, and that was what was fun about doing animation. Nobody saw you.
Let's talk about a session and how it worked. You said in an interview you did 2 of them a week.
Yeah.
Did you get the scripts in advance?
I don't remember getting a script in advance, but we would go in and it would be Alex Lovey, who was, I think, producing. And we had Joe Terra from the network, was always there, who was another Italian, who I love to make cookies for. And it's a wonder he has any teeth left in his mouth because my cookies, at that time, I was not a very good cook. And then the cast. And we would just go in and do it. And I guess they would then draw it after they showed us pictures when we started. This is who you are. This is what you're going to look like, what the character's going to look like. And that kind of would help you get an idea of what you were going to do. And then we just would do it, We'd have a little rehearsal. We always would have fun. But I don't remember getting the script ahead of time. I think we would just get handed stuff when we went in, and we would just do it.
Was Alex Lovey the director of the session, or was it Gordon Hunt?
Alex, I really knew. I knew Alex because he gave me my first job and pulled me out of the pile there. I didn't know the others as well. I honestly don't remember. I knew him as a producer, and probably he was directing too. I just was having fun.
Do you remember watching any episodes?
Yes, I do remember watching some episodes, and I've also watched them since then. Occasionally I'll go back and look at something because somebody will send me an email or a letter or something, and it's like, because it was a long time ago. I really had a lot of fun doing it, and it was such a big part of my life, and I wanted to write. So I got away from doing voices and started just writing, and that has become my life. That's how my husband and I have earned our living for the last 35, 40 years, something like that, just as writers.
How did you transition into writing?
Gary Owens. Gary Owens was the one. I always wanted to write, and I used to write for the radio. I used to write the sketches that Terry and I would do together at KSFO. So I decided I was going to write a script. I was going to write a Mary Tyler Moore script and see what I could do. So I did that in my spare time when I was on the radio and not at Hanna-Barbera. And then I showed it to Gary Owens, who was always my champion, my buddy. And Gary thought it was good. And Gary gave it to his friend, who was an agent, William Morris. And I got signed as a writer. And all of a sudden I started writing. And my whole goal was to kind of move away from the acting that I had been doing, because I was doing a lot of commercials, a lot of that kind of thing. And I won a Clio Award, and move into writing. And that's what I did. I kind of am sad that I didn't stick with voice stuff too, because it was just fun. It was so much fun.
Do you remember what the Clio was for?
Carl Gottlieb, who
Yes.
wrote Jaws, is a really old friend of mine. Carl and I go way back, and he was with the committee in San Francisco, and I worked with a lot of those guys because we did a lot of improvisational stuff. And so Carl and I did a commercial together for a men's store called Grodin's. That's what we got the Clio for, Carl and I doing that. We'd go in and they would give us the information. This is the product, or this is the sale, this is what it costs, whatever. And we would make some stuff up. They didn't know what we were going to do. We would just improvise, two people talking about like pants or something. As long as we got the information in and as long as it was funny, that was the ad.
So it sounds like it was kind of the Stiller and Mira Blue Nun, or which were, that kind of commercial was so fun.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Or Mike Nichols, Elaine May,
Right. I did the first set of national spots for The Gap, for Taco Bell, for a lot of big companies who were moving into radio at the time in the 70s. And I also did the first season of Sesame Street, where they were doing those counting songs.
Yes.
I sang a couple of those. It's a Lovely 11 Morning.
That was you.
It's a lovely 11 morning. I heard 11 birds, whatever.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, 10 tiny turtles on the telephone talking to the grocery with Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks, or maybe it was Commander Cody. I don't know who I was singing with. They said, there's this new show. It's called Sesame Street. Okay. Well, why don't you come down and we're going to do this stuff and it'll be fun. Okay. So I went down and I recorded the first season of Sesame Street.
I don't know if you worked with him, but Bud Lucky, I believe, was the animation director of a lot of those 10 Tiny Turtles on the Telephone and a lot of those things.
The guy that I worked with who was producing a lot of those was Walt Kramer. He had a company called Imagination Incorporated, and I did a bunch of stuff for Walt. And he's the guy that brought me into Sesame Street for that. They were doing a lot of that stuff in San Francisco at the time. A lot of the animated stuff and the musical stuff was done up north.
So you were in the background on the 10 Tiny Turtles going, la, la, la.
Yeah, that was me. And, and then a bunch of other things. And it was going down there into the studio, and the band was there, and you're wearing the cans on your head, and you're singing along, and it was just all fun.
Wow, those are burned in so many minds. I'm telling you, that's very cool.
People are always shocked when I say, oh yeah, that was me. I did that. Because I was a teenager and I used to like to watch Julia Child on TV. oh, I would listen to Julia Child. Oh, yes, yes. And I had a character with Terry called Miss Sherry, who lived in a flop house south of Market. And Miss Sherry would do a recipe on the show every day. Usually it involved capturing a pigeon in Union Square and putting it in a paper bag and taking it back and cooking it on her hot plate in her room. And she talked like Julia Child. And so Walt, I guess, heard that and said, well, we need you for Sesame Street. It was a great voice to learn. I was always watching people. And you mentioned Carol Channing earlier. I did Carol Channing for a radio commercial. I can't remember what the product was for, but I did her voice. I impersonated her for something, some kind of thing. I don't remember what I was supposed to be eating or doing. Or I remember I was chewing cardboard because I was supposed to be eating something that was delicious. So that's how we worked in radio and in radio commercials. You might have a mouthful of cardboard talking about pizza.
The stuff that was sometimes the most basic stuff, not the big client stuff, was the most fun because you had such freedom.
Well, yes. I remember we had a line of a chain of cafeterias called Foster's in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And I got hired by one of the big ad agencies. I used to work for all of them. It was real Mad Men days. They brought me in and they said, we want you to do these ads. Hire who you want, pick who you want to work with. And I might have picked probably Carl or Terry or somebody. And they said, and do whatever you want. Just mention the chicken pot pies. And it becomes like, well, okay then. You know, you've got all us wackadoos out there, and I'm picking the wackadoos I want to work with. And we're talking about chicken pot pie. And I mean, when the hell do they ever do that with advertising anymore? No. I mean, my husband went to NYU Film School, and his teacher was Marty Scorsese, who was teaching classes there at the time before making, Taxi Driver and that stuff. So Alan learned from him. And then Alan's first job out of college, and before he came to California and I met him, was being a studio manager for the guy that did all of those Sometimes You Feel Like a Nut, I'm a Spicy Meatball, those ads, which were great in the old days. Commercial director in New York, who then later came out to Los Angeles. I think he made some films, but Albert Butin and Bob Giraldi. Bob Giraldi was the guy who directed all that stuff. He worked for them. Those were the days when we used to have fun doing those ads. We would do outrageous things. I did a ton of film dubbing with Carl, with all these guys, Harry Shearer, Michael McKeon. We were all improv actors. And so they would bring a herd of us in, and we would just go to town. And the person who was the casting lady for a lot of that was Carl Gottlieb's wife, Allison Kane. And Allison would round us all up, and we'd show up somewhere, and we'd have fun. And then we'd get paid. And it was great. And all that time, I'm trying to write scripts on the side, and I'm on the radio at night, and I'm just trying to, become a writer. That's what I was trying to do.
You have a Maude credit, Arthur's Worry.
That was my very first writing thing. We got nominated for a Humanitas Prize for that episode. It involves, and weirdly enough, I was at an awards dinner at the Beverly Hilton, I guess, where they have those awards. And I was at the same table with Bill Macy from Maude. And I said, I wrote that episode where you kissed Arthur. I was like, and it was like, oh, weird. But, it was one of those glancing things. But that was my very first writing job, yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty good...
Yeah, that was, Gary got me an agent, and the agent got me a meeting, and I went in and we pitched, and that was that. I bought a washer and dryer. That's what I bought with the money. I bought a Maytag, only the best.
Oh, yeah.
A Maytag washer and dryer. Oh, and I bought a Betamax. I was styling. I bought a Betamax machine. That was obsolete in about 6 months. It's like, that's so I could record all of the Hanna-Barbera stuff and everything. And it was like, that did not really work. That thing was under my bed for years.
Let's talk about the movies that you're with your husband.
My husband and I write together. We've worked on a bunch of things for various projects. We were two of the writers on Chaos Theory, the Ryan Reynolds movie that came out about 10 years ago at Warner's. We have worked constantly doing rewrites, fixing stories, originals. We have a pilot that we just did. We did an animated thing. Then we did a pilot right before the strike happened that producers have now picked up, and it's getting packaged. Meanwhile, we're writing another script right now. So we keep busy. We have our manager and our, we're working. That's what we're doing.
Still working and still married. That's good.
Still working and still married because we met working. We met writing together. And so when you have that in common, it makes it kind of easy. People said, if I would have killed if I had to work with my wife or my husband, one of us would be dead. But no, we get along fine because we had that first experience was being friends, literally being friends.
That's so important.
Yes, I remember we had started writing together. We were always going out to dinner and talking about stories and stuff, but we weren't involved. He had a girlfriend, I was dating somebody, and then we kind of broke up with the people. Oh, we went out on a double date with our respective partners, and I think they tried to pick each other up. We knew that was the end of the relationships, and we continued to have dinner. And then one night we're driving back from dinner, and we stopped at a stoplight, and Alan leaned over and he kissed me, and I said, "Was this a date?" And he said, "Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a date." And after that, okay, it was a date. And then we were having lunch with a producer about 3 years later after we started dating. And she said, "So when are you two going to get married?" And we just said, well, this year. Sometime this year. There was no proposal. And she said, "Well, you better get on it because it's already June. And if you guys want to get married this year, all the ballrooms and the venues are all get booked up, right?" So we thought, wow, gee, maybe we should do this. We should rent a ballroom. We should get married. So we started looking at various hotel ballrooms, and the only one that was available was the Bel Air Hotel on December 9th, which was like way at the end of the year. And I think all the swans and the lilies at that point were dead. The beautiful, it all dies because it's December. They cut it all back. So we got married. We were planning on doing it, but it was this woman who encouraged us by saying, actually pinned us down to a date. We never had an official proposal. We have been married for like 100 years. We're very happy, and we work together every day. And it all came about like, when are you two going to ever get married? Oh, okay, we probably should.
Well, it can work.
It can.
And I'm telling you, it's the same with my wife. We can talk. We're both talkers, and we talk for a long time, sometimes too long. And and it can get contentious, but it can also be funny, and we quote things. I'm sure you guys do that.
Oh, listen, we do the Big Lebowski. We do that. We do any Coen Brothers movie. We know the dialogue. It really does help to talk. Being friends is definitely important. Mm-hmm. It's definitely important. You can't go on without that, especially doing this kind of work.
How did your family react to a lot of the stuff you did?
Well, Alan and I were writing. We were working over at Warner Brothers doing a bunch of stuff. And my mom always wanted to be an actress. So she was very impressed by this. My dad was a first responder. He was a fireman in San Francisco. So he was into like putting fires out. He was really cool with everything. She was like, I Love Lucy. She was totally starstruck. She came down and stayed in our place for a while, at one point for a couple of weeks. And she answered the phone. And she got a couple of celebrities who had called, people she knew who they were, who called. And then she was just could not get over that. They called you? They called you? It's like, well, yeah, I mean, we're working. And yeah, they called me. Then she sent a photo of herself down to us with my dad in the background as a casting thing. It was like her version of a headshot. So I'm sitting in the office with our producers and I'm looking at my mail. And there's this thing from my mother, and Lynn Stallmaster, the casting guy, happened to be there because he was working on this thing. Mm-hmm. And he says, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, that's my mom. She wants to be in something. She wants to get cast in something." He looks at the picture and he goes, "Who's the guy behind her?" "Well, that's my dad." He said, "Do you think he could play like a cop or something?" I said, "Well, he's a fireman." And he said, "Could you get me some pictures?" So I called my parents and I said, "I really need a headshot of Dad." So he sent me his official fire department headshot in his uniform. Well, he got cast in this movie with Terry Garr. My parents had to come down to Los Angeles so my dad could be in this movie. He had like 4 days work in the film playing a cop. I tried to keep my mother amused during that time by showing her stuff, taking her to Beverly Hills, driving her around. And after 2 days, my father said, "Would they be upset if I didn't come in tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I really can't because Mom's real upset. She's real jealous. I think we better go back to San Francisco." So I had to tell them, and they said, "Okay, we'll work around it." But they went home early because she just could not stand. I don't know. She thought Terry Garr was going to. No, we knew Terry. No, she wasn't going to like make a pass at my father. She's not going to want Al Gori, the fireman. No, He's an extra. He's standing there in a uniform holding a dog on a leash. No. So that was Fran, and she was very unhappy that she didn't get to be in a movie. She really, really wanted to do that. And we would chase movie stars when I was a kid. We always were at the airport on the weekend waiting for somebody to get off a plane. If some show or film were shooting in San Francisco, they would be there. They would drag us down there. I was on the set of Experiment in Terror with Blake Edwards. We were standing in the crowd, my parents with my sister and me, and he thought we were cute little girls. So he says, do you want to come in and see us shoot? Okay, so he took us into the bank for one of the big scenes with Lee Remick and the bad guy at the bank. And we're learning to blow bubbles with our double bubble gum. We're behind Blake Edwards as the scene is being shot, and somebody looks over and nudges him, and he sees my sister and I have giant bubblegum bubbles in our mouths, ready to pop. And he said, cut, get them out of here. Because had we popped those bubbles, that wouldn't have been very good for the scene. So he took us out. But we were on the set of a lot of things because of my parents. They were chasing Jack Lemmon through an airport one time, and I actually collided with him. I didn't even know who I was colliding with to get the autograph. My father and mother would send me with a pen and an autograph book. I have Steve McQueen. I got a bunch of people.
That's something.
Yeah, when he was doing Bullet, in San Francisco. I was in Reno when they did The Misfits. My parents dragged us up there. We were looking for Marilyn Monroe on the bridge when she throws a ring into the Truckee River when she gets divorced at the beginning of The Misfits. Yeah, we were there. I'm in a crowd somewhere, just watching, not knowing what the heck was going on, just a kid watching. Yeah, they were very weird, my family, very strange.
You got into the thick of it, and what you find is when it becomes sort of an everyday thing, is there certain people, certain celebrities or artists that you feel, oh, gee, that's really cool. But for the most part, you're all working, and it's sort of a day-to-day thing now. You know what I mean?
Yes. I mean, we've worked with Alan Arkin. We're huge Alan Arkin fans. We love the In-Laws. We ended up working with Alan. It's a day-to-day. You're talking to him, and you're talking to him on the phone, or you're talking to him sitting in a room with him. He's doing lines. He's like acting things out, and you're watching, and you're talking, and it's work. You put that other part like, oh, I'm impressed with this person. You put that out of your mind, because otherwise, how are you going to do that? Even doing the voices. If you're working with somebody that you've seen on TV or somebody who used to do the voice you watched when you were like 6 years old, sitting in your onesies in front of the TV or whatever, no, that's this guy you're working with, and you're working too, and you don't stare and don't ask for an autograph. You just have to be cool. Also, I am legitimately face blind. There's a big long word for it that my doctor told me, but I have trouble recognizing people. So many times I have talked to people not even knowing who I was speaking with, because I either don't recognize them, I didn't watch their show, and so I talk to them like a normal person, unless the voice. That's how I recognize people, by their voices. And my husband always says, when you watch movies and stuff, you listen. You don't really even look half the time. And yeah, I do. I'm listening. I take in things through my ears. It's weird, but that's how I function.
Not to me. I feel like it's a different experience. You focus on different things when you just hear the audio.
Absolutely. And I think it came from me being so young and having that happen where I couldn't use my eyes for about 3 months. I think it really made an impression on me or something, because even after they took the bandages off and I was able to go and sit in the living room with my parents and watch Mod Squad, I could only listen to Mod Squad. They didn't want me looking directly at the television. So that kind of made a habit of doing a lot of listening.
But yeah, I do agree with you. There is the audio, and particularly since you were part of the audio of Hanna-Barbera, that was one of their strongest points. The animation may have had its limits and had to be done quickly and all of those things, but the soundtracks, the casting, the music, it was always fun and always top drawer.
Right. And one of the greatest things about working at Hanna-Barbera when I was working there was I got to meet some of the great radio voices of the 30s and 40s who went into animation after television came in. It is really astounding because these radio personalities, people like B. Benaderet and guys like that, I mean, they were huge, huge stars the same way any television star is a star now. And they were stars because of their voices. To work with these people when they're older, and I'm a kid, or teenager rather, and it was wild to see them. I mean, Janet Waldo, I used to hear her stuff when I was a kid. When I was like first watching cartoons, I would hear Janet Waldo stuff.
Yeah, she was all through the 60s, and she was, of course, on radio before that and on I Love Lucy. And
Yeah.
And also to see a person standing in front of you and hearing that voice come out of them, that's kind of mind-blowing. Even to this day it is.
Yeah, I never got to work with Mel Blanc. I met two of the Warner Brothers cartoon producers. I met Chuck Jones. I mean, that was just absolutely thrilling to meet them, because those were the guys that I idolized as a child, till Yogi Bear and Huckleberry Hound. I loved Top Cat. I loved all of those shows. I used to watch them all. And the other one was Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. And it was Hanna-Barbera going into kind of early evening programming, family programming. Later, maybe 15 years ago, an agent said, you ought to go back and do more of that. Maybe you want to do some more voice stuff, because there were some opportunities. I said, yeah, okay, I'll go back. Yeah, go ahead. So they sent me out on some voice things. I know I auditioned for Family Guy for the part of the mother on Family Guy. I obviously did not get that. But the difference in going out animation interviews in, say, 1998, 2000, than going out on animation interviews in the 70s or even the 80s was the big, big stars who you would meet in the waiting room, who were up for the same thing you were up for. In other words, it wasn't just a world of voice actors who had come from radio or who just specialized in voice stuff. All of a sudden, you had movie stars and TV stars who wanted to do animation, and they were casting people and actually drawing the characters to resemble the people. That was a very big change in the world of voiceover stuff. You will commonly now see big stars doing the voices in animated films. But I think it's time for a promotion for Rosemary. Hello, police headquarters. This is that delectable doll of a dispatcher, Rosemary.
They got to bring it back, and they got to have you be Rosemary, and this time she'd run the department.
Yeah, she'd be the chief at the.
She'd still answer the phone.
Of course, but I think it's time for a promotion for Rosemary.
Well, Penry would be promoted too, because he was studying.
Oh, I know.
To be,
Hong Kong and Rosemary should be running the department, and it would be perfect.
Indeed.
Sarge is now retired. He comes in occasionally and causes trouble. That kind of thing. It'd be fun.
Yeah, we got it. So anyway, the other thing I think Rosemary could do is host, like they did with Space Ghost, the Coast to Coast. Rosemary should host a daytime talk show.
Oh, Rosemary could do a daytime talk show.
Yeah.
I can ask you about all kinds of things. If you have a good pot roast recipe, tell me. But yeah.
You got so many great stories, and there's so much to talk about, and we could go on dancing in this marathon forever.
Yeah, well.
But I got to tell you, I'm so grateful that you did this interview, and I think everyone listening is really thrilled too. And on behalf of everybody listening and all of the Hong Kong Phooey lovers out there, I'm just going to say, Kathy Gori, I love you-y. Woo woo woo-y.
Okay. Hello, police headquarters. This is your charming cutie constable, Rosemary. Oh, hi, Gloria. Going to the Hong Kong Phooey fan club meeting tonight? I'm writing a new club song. Hong Kong Phooey, love you, woo-wee, woo-woo-woo-wee. Hong Kong Phooey. I never hear from him anymore. He never calls. He never writes. I never hear from him. I think he's done with me.
I just love it. I love it. And thanks to all of you for listening. And please subscribe. And also just please be with us next time. But until then, bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed the fantastic world of Hanna and Barbera with Greg Ehrbar. Please join us again, and many thanks for listening.